quite nice to be connected to you guys remotely. I wish we could be there in person to deliver this session. We attended, or rather I attended FCS 2 years ago, and it was an amazing experience. But I guess what Retnam and I would like to do today is to try to recreate some of the discussions that that the same level of energy that we had 2 years ago when we participated in person. So for today's masterclass, we only have 1 hour, so we'll start immediately. So before I hand over my time to Retnam, so I thought maybe I should just introduce some key terminologies or offer 3 different provocations towards the title of the session, which is Cities of the Second Tier, New Normal, New Shocks, and New Resilience. So let me just share my screen. Okay, so just a brief introduction. So I run Spatial Anatomy. It's a design firm that's based in Singapore. We work on projects ranging from architecture to urban consultancy. Very interested in design planning and advocacy. So we've essentially designed spaces, objects, and strategies for cities, focusing on everything ranging from dealing with dense urban settings to regeneration projects, dealing with productive spaces for learning, for working, and other forms of production, and so on. So we worked at the macro scale, at the scale of cities to regions, down to the more micro scale, at the scale of a singular building, how everyday infrastructure could be integrated within an existing framework, like urban space and so on. Yes, so if we were to look at the title for today's session, it's Cities of the Second Tier, New Normal, New Shocks, New Resilience. Perhaps I can just spend the next 5 to 10 minutes to define some of these terminologies. So Cities of the Second Tier, I find it to be very interesting because I'm sure everyone knows this graph, right? We have gone past a point where more than half of the world's population live in urban areas, and this number is definitely going to rise. And by 2050, we have 80% of the world's population living in cities and only 20% living in rural areas. But I guess the bigger question is, what kind of urban centers do people live in? Are we talking about first-tier cities, mega cities like Jakarta, Tokyo, New York, Manila, and so on? Or are we seeing more people living in second-tier cities or even third-tier cities? And what are the implications of that, right? So if you were to look at the growth rates of cities between 2015 to 2025, you can see the box highlighted in red. These are capital cities or first-tier cities. And the rest are essentially second-tier and third-tier cities around Southeast Asia. And this is where you start to see the actual growth rates, right? In the next 10 to 15 years, we will see urban centers exploding, expanding in second and third tier cities, much more dense as compared to first tier cities. And hence, it is crucial that we focus our efforts in looking at good development strategies for these second and third tier cities. And hence, I think if we can use the Vietnamese example, since Retnam is a very resident expert on Vietnam, we will essentially see the focus shifting from cities like Ho Chi Minh City to Cần Thơ, where Cần Thơ is poised to grow at a much quicker rate than Ho Chi Minh City. So we now then come to the next 3 key words. Firstly, new normal. So I'm sure everyone has been are very familiar with the word new normal. There's no going back to business as usual in a post-COVID world. So what implications does it have in terms of our cities. I think perhaps one of the major shift is the decentralization of production areas for offices or corporate headquarters. I think if you look at Wall Street Journal or Bloomberg, over the past few weeks, you start to see news articles like this: COVID-19 pandemic loosens Silicon Valley's tight grip on tech industry, or Bloomberg, Goldman in Florida, Hewlett in Houston, who's next? So I think if you look at the US, there is an increasing amount of tech companies' headquarters or financial headquarters moving away from the typical first-tier cities like New York, or even moving away from Silicon Valley. So what the implications of that is that it's going to either increase the rent prices, housing prices in these second and third tier cities in the US, or it's going to create a much more equitable landscape where people can work in different parts of the country rather than focusing on the keynotes. So this is the US example. But if we were to see what's happening in Asia in general, this decentralization of corporate spaces, production spaces, is not that new. I think with COVID, it's just going to accelerate the pace, right? So if we look at the US example, we see the shiny corporate towers decentralizing into second-tier cities. But if you look at China, it's already happening. Where centers of production are no longer in main cities, but in smaller villages in second and third tier cities, otherwise known as Taobao villages. It's one of the most interesting phenomenon that has sprouted out in the past 4 to 5 years. These are just some images of what a Taobao village looks like. I like this quote a lot. Rather Taobao at home than hustle and bustle in cities. So what this means is that this new normal, where you get to work and live in different parts of the country, it essentially allows it prevents the growth of megacities. It prevents overcrowding in dense urban environment. You might actually get a better quality of life, although that warrants a separate discussion. But I think it is crucial as urban planners, economic policy makers, to design living environments that is crucial that's suitable for a decentralized production model, right? If you look at how some of these Taobao villages look like, they don't look like your glitzy corporate campuses or offices, but rather it looks like very banal, very everyday spaces, right? You're producing your goods, your orders from your own living room or within your own neighborhood squares or parks. And hence, it is crucial from a design perspective to really see how can we design livable, productive spaces for cities of the second tier. Next term is shocks. I think we all know what how COVID has impacted us, particularly in the area of food supply. I think Singapore was hit particularly badly in terms of food supply. If you look at different news articles, you see titles like "Fragile ASEAN Food Supply Chains Creak Under Strain of Pandemic." Singapore allays fear of food shortage after Malaysia shuts borders. So I think the idea of food production, food distribution is very real when a pandemic hits us. So I think the obvious solution is essentially to increase domestic productivity in terms of food production. And Singapore has been approaching the 30 by 30 policy. So by 2030, 30% of the food production will be based locally, will be achieved domestically. So if we know that food production is so important, it will be produced domestically, how then do we create urban environments to support such an endeavor, right? Especially in land scarce areas like Singapore, right? Or even for cities where given the lack of proper infrastructure, you need to shorten the transportation time from the production areas to the areas where the food gets distributed. And hence, apart from investing in logistics infrastructure, I think it's crucial that we use this opportunity to rethink how our cities can be planned, can be designed to incorporate production spaces within where we live, where we work, and where we play. Hence, one of the key projects that we recently worked on is the Green Agora project. It is a modular structure that we envision that could be replicated in different parts of Singapore or even in other parts of Southeast Asia. It is a modular structure that allows people to grow their own food, and at the same time, it's also a social space where you can have your community activities taking place in there. And we see this structure to be play an important part in urban infills around cities, especially dense urban areas. And finally, we come to new resilience, right? I think if we can accept the new normal, we can quickly bounce back from shocks. I think we need to develop a new sense of resilience. I think in terms of resilience, it's not just resilience in terms of bouncing back to normal, but it's to build a sense of resilience within the community, within the society, so that we can plan for future evolution of when the next pandemic strikes, or when there's a fundamental change in the way we sorry, there's some echo in the background. Yeah, so I think it's important to build resilience when we start to, so that we can respond to changes in the socio-economic conditions of the day. So one of the projects I'll just briefly go through that we worked on was the rehabilitation of an old agriculture village in China, in Hainan. So given the shift of production away from these old agricultural villages, these pieces of infrastructure have been left empty. No one's using them, no one's really living in there. So we worked with the local villages and the local mayor to define ways to rejuvenate some of these villages, to give it a new purpose, a new function beyond its agricultural production use. So we work with the local villages to understand what they need, to understand how by introducing a new livelihood, it would transform their community, or new pieces of infrastructure that would actually improve their lives, and so on. So one of our proposal was to really design a rural getaway artist residency villages where we can tap on the unused fish ponds, unused plantations, and convert them into livable short-term stay where the villages could be retrained as caretakers, and while taking care of these visitors, they can also gain skills in the hospitality side of the village. So that's my very brief introduction, and I'll hand over the time to Retnam before we do a short poll. Thank you.
Thank you, Kelvin. I hope everyone can hear me clearly. Okay, thanks, Kelvin. I mean, I enjoyed your session about new shocks, and I hope it can lead to new ideas as well, right? Because when there's a shock, there's also an idea. There's also opportunities as well. So let me share my screen. And where are we here? Here we go. Yes. Well, thank you. Firstly, congratulations to the organizers for putting together this event. Yesterday was just totally exhilarating and interesting. Lots of new ideas. Yeah, I hear an echo. Is that okay? Okay, so I'll carry on. That's me. In essence, I've done full circle. I've been in the private sector, the public sector. As Kelvin mentioned, I've come up to Vietnam 5 years ago and spending a lot of time in Vietnam. What my opening remarks really for today is following the financial crisis in 2008. I mean, we all talk about this current new shocks. But then I just like to refresh our minds that we saw public funds back in the last financial crisis that flowed disproportionately to polluting industries and also to societies, mostly wealthy. This must not happen again. Right? We must start investing in socio-economic systems resilient to crisis. And that's a point which I'd like to expound on today. This morning, it was refreshing in my conversations with AFD, a French group, a French agency, and who aspire to invest in circular and low carbon economies in Vietnam. And from industrial to regenerate agriculture. And as some of you might know, those of you who are in my age group, that the then Prime Minister of Malaysia, Dr. Tun Mahathir, talked about developing the agriculture economy in the late 80s versus the manufacturing sector. And it was not very well received. One of my concerns here in Vietnam is we are now moving towards manufacturing, but as someone mentioned recently, we could eventually be a landfill technology where you attract technology, machinery, and processes that are not really the right fit to develop the industry. My home is in Hanoi. I'm currently in Hanoi, and Hanoi is the capital of Vietnam. It aspires to be a creative capital, and it's nominated by UNESCO in November in Paris in 2019. It's a city like many metropolis. There is this tension between livability and vibrancy, and I think that's a very interesting area to look into. I mean, every city aspires to be livable, but at the same time to be economically vibrant in terms of attracting investments and attracting talent. Now, of course, that by nature creates problems for the environment. So in my session, I'm probably going to, I think we are posing some questions, but I also want to pose some questions because I understand this is going to be a fairly interactive session where Kelvin and I will also discuss as a fire chat, you might say, you might raise some questions and we would like to take on your questions and your thoughts. Now, I want to see how Asian cities and Asian youth can collaborate to be more sustainable and enhance entrepreneurship and innovation, right? Because we've heard yesterday discussions about social entrepreneurship. Now, the challenge I face in my working on the ground, in particularly in the second, third tier cities within Vietnam is most cities are not only seeking the know-how, but also the how-to. And there is this whole problem which they grapple with in terms of the implementation. The slide on the left is the city of Da Nang, which is my home for a year. And of course, Singapore being everyone's aspiration to be a livable city, but not necessarily the right model for every city. So again, a lesson we can learn for cities out there, and for entrepreneurs and startups. Yes, you can use Singapore as a springboard into the region, but not necessarily you have to emulate Singapore's model. So know how versus how to. Now, what I see a need to is really to, because of one, we're all now we're all unable to interact, but that doesn't prevent us from jointly developing pilot projects. And because knowledge can be shared quickly cross border, and look at this session today, yesterday, today. I mean, they're all across the world, the region, and so we can develop, get together, and quickly. I mean, you can multiply your models across locations, and I'm a big proponent of cross border integration, both from a urban planning perspective, also emulating models which I used to do when I was in Singapore and head of industry. I then implemented similar projects across the region. Obviously, youth, you have the tenacity and the energy and the open-mindedness to help cities to reconceive a new model, and looking at how we could, I mean, taking during the Sharman session with YY Ventures, regular business into social business area. Now, that's I like that whole looking at urban norms, and because I think there can be greater collaboration between city to city. So first tier city to second tier city, second tier city to third tier cities within your own, within Bandung and Surabaya, and between Penang and Kuala Lumpur. So we need to generate a model, and a model. I think Bandung's model of urban acupuncture is wonderful, and I'd like to build on it. I mean, the esteemed speakers talked about the ABC, and I would like to look at, when you work together in developing some know-how or developing some solutions, we have to combine the academia, business, social enterprise, community, C, D, I would say decision makers in local government, you need them. E is e-commerce, because that enables you to scale up very quickly. And F, financial institutions, both bank and non-bank. So I mean, we know that there is a lot of other funding mechanisms that you can tap on. So so transformation of a city, and I'll also like to talk about the tangible and intangible assets, because I think we need to look at some of the what I call a social smart city, and where you also look at your intangible assets that are in relation to your heritage and your culture, and these are other aspects of intangible assets, and we need to preserve them. And very often, policymakers in the rush of urbanization and local governments fail to understand how to protect heritage, because that's your valuable asset in terms of creating sustainable tourism. And not necessarily having to build mega shopping centers and attracting large brands. This morning, I spent a couple of hours with the vice chairmen of several provinces in Vietnam, and there was this emphasis about three things really. I mean, they talked about the importance of digital, being digitally connected to both the community, and also using AI and using data to make better decisions. And it was good to hear it from the head of the Ho Chi Minh think tank, or government policy think tank. And so that, in my view, is so you need community engagement, and you need support the effective policy implementation. I'd like to echo what was said yesterday as well about the end of monocentric cities and more polycentric cities. And I think we will touch on that as well. Very quickly, Medellin is an inspiring example of a city that was extremely violent. It's a simple idea of creating a system of moving people between on a cable system, and so you don't have to necessarily always use state-of-the-art technology. It could be a simple way of connecting people. So I talked about cross-border, and cross-border could be trucking, it could be moving on a cable. It could be setting up incubation centers in places like Kelvin talked about, by the pond, by the farm, and accelerating new ideas and bringing people together. So so again, social. This is Medellin today, and so we see the ability to rebrand, and through looking at how you could. Well, of course, leadership plays a very important role. The city in the south of Vietnam called Binh Duong City has a triple helix model. It's taken leaf from the Eindhoven in Netherlands, where the focus was not on technology, the focus was on leadership. Binh Duong as a city, it's approximately, I think, 50 kilometers from Ho Chi Minh in the south, has been able to focus on the importance of leadership, and then building the other pillars in terms of giving the city a strong system, in terms of inclusiveness, in terms of being economically vibrant, and also attracting the right talent through education and culture. And Binh Duong has done that well. I'll not mention this. I'll just talk about very quickly a city I was involved in the center of Vietnam, Tam Kỳ, very small city, coastal city. This is in the center of, it's close to Da Nang and Hoi An, which most of you may be more familiar with. Tam Kỳ used to be the central administration of Quang province, and today it's used graffiti and art to make itself unique. So it's got a graffiti and art village called Tam Tan Village. And so this again is an example which we were involved in helping them to identify the diverse tourism resources to strengthen their proposition within the central part of Vietnam. So again, we talked about intangible assets. So that's important to see how you can build these intangible assets. But most importantly is how we see more talent returning. Now, Tam Ky's problem as a city, Tam Ky was losing its talent to Da Nang and to Ho Chi Minh and to other more vibrant economies. But today, talent has returned to Tam Ky, and because of its reasons of displacement and unemployment. So many of the people who worked in the urban centers have moved back to some of these provinces. Now, this talent will balance the city to be more desirable, live, work, and pray, not play. And I'll tell you why I use the word pray. I'll skip this. So cultural heritage, and another city we advise a new district that's going to be part of Hanoi in 2025 is home to the largest pagoda, which hosts the World Buddhist Festival every 2 years, and that's the only event that sort of revives the city. And we came up with this theme through our economic city branding strategy of work, live, and pray for Kim Bang district, which is a city with a very large pagoda. And of course, I think developing economic clusters, we're going to find some vanishing traits, and because of technology. And it's, again, I think we talked about building back better. So there's a realization from the pandemic, and some industries obviously will disappear, and this is inevitable. And I think there could be other innovative ways for youth, for startups, social enterprises to develop new solutions to upgrade certain skill sets of the traditional industry. Kelvin mentioned about Kanter. Kanter is a very unique city in the Mekong region, and it was a Japanese professor who reminded me that the first and the original floating market is in Kanter and not in Bangkok, as most of us are thought of. The World Bank invested significant amount of money in the urban regeneration of Kanter. Sadly, what it led to the development of the river and the banks, and that prevented interaction and integration between the boats and the community. And so, strangely enough, it affected tourism in that sense, or affected the attractiveness of the proposition of country being a floating position of country. I hear an echo. I'm not sure if you hear echo too. Okay, so I think before I go back, what is the normal? And we are going to keep some time for us to have a conversation. We talked about the new normal, but what is the new normal? And I was talking with Kelvin prior to this session. Is that there are different business structures that we can look at, and I want to come up with some controversial suggestions. I mean, today we see lots of buildings, we see hotels being empty, we see landlords, owners of buildings need to take a different view in terms of how they collect rent. And I think landlords, if you're a landlord, I would suggest that you think about taking equity in a business instead of charging rental, right? And I know that in some airports, the Changi Airport administration takes a percentage of the sales. But in this case, I think if you have an old house or building, encourage startups to come together and offset your rental with equity. Now, out of 10 startups that operate within your premises, 2 or 3 may work, and there you go. And of course, you're also supporting the industry, and you could register yourself price while being a landlord, and back your profit into your business model. The second point is creating a sustainable tourism. Now, it was alluded to by earlier speaker, and I think Bhutan is a very good example. So today we noticed that speaker mentioned that Venice no longer has tourists, but maybe we should mitigate the number of tourists, charge a fee for incoming tourists, give them a better experience. I was advising a company that runs what they call co-working places in different parts of Vietnam to change their co-working place and create activities, create events, your TEDx kind of environment. Yeah, so that's about what I have to. I'm going to stop sharing and go back to where we are. Hi, Kelvin, are you back there?
Yes, I'm back here. Thank you very much, Retnam, for your sharing. I guess we can begin our discussion now. Do we have any questions, any burning questions?
Sorry about the echo, by the way. There was an echo in my conversation for some reason.
Yes. Okay, perhaps I think before we take questions, can we actually do a very simple activity? Let me just share my screen again. So we currently have 43 attendees.
46.
We'd just like to, 46, yeah, including us. So can I invite everyone to essentially take out your mobile phone now, scan this QR code and fill in a couple of questions. I think we want to generate some very quick discussion and get to know you guys, which city you come from, which second or third tier city do you think there is a pressing issue that needs to be resolved, and that could be our main anchor point to kickstart our discussion. But of course, if you have any pressing questions, feel free to raise your hand or ask the question in the chat box and we can answer. Okay, we'll probably give everyone 20 more seconds or 15 more seconds to respond to the. All right, let me check if everyone has entered their responses. A moment. Vote. Your name. Oh no. Okay.
Should we flash the questions on the screen maybe?
Yes, I think so, yeah. Okay, I've just launched the questions. Question 2, what is your city of residence? And could you name a second or third tier city in your home country that is currently facing a structural problem or shock? Activate poll.
So maybe Kelvin, as you are you waiting for them to respond to the question?
Yep.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I mean, I guess the question is aligned with this whole realization from the pandemic.
Okay, I think the responses are slowly coming in live. What is your city of residence? Manila, Phnom Penh, Dhaka. Could you name a second or third tier city in your home country that's facing a problem or shock? Phnom Penh, too many problems. Quezon City, Jakarta, these are all first-tier cities, if I may.
Yeah, but
Yeah.
I think that's what I like to hear, Kelvin, because I always talk about Bombay and Ho Chi and then Hanoi in terms of the problems they face. And when I first came here, what I noticed, I mean, from potholes on the road to infrastructure inefficiencies, and these presented to me opportunities because and I mean really the lack of a bus tracking system, and so I was completely delighted to meet a company called Bus Map in Ho Chi Minh that came up with not from the pub, there's a bottom-up initiative, just providing the community with the ability to track the bus services. You know, when the bus is coming to the town. Unlike us in Singapore and Hong Kong, where we walk to a bus stop, in some places you'll have to wait not in a very comfortable bus stop. And as someone who takes buses quite frequently, I think that's quite important. So again, like you said, the problems really present opportunities for us to come up with a solution and market it and commercialize it. Calvin, you there?
Yes, I'm here.
Okay. Are you consolidating the feedback there?
Yes, we are all consolidating.
Okay.
Okay, so I thanks, Retnam, for sharing your points. Definitely agree that a lot of the issues are essentially embedded in first-tier cities, and to some extent, it's really a textbook case study or example of what second-tier cities should not strive towards in the quest of economic or social growth. If we were to look at some of these comments, what are some of the structural problems or shocks in 2 or 3 sentences? We see the usual suspects like traffic, mobility, flooding, street safety, food insecurity, corruption, which then leads to every single other problem. Standardized public bus system, dedicated lanes, and so on. So maybe I could pose this question to Retnam. Looking at all these structural problems, right? Do you think how should second-tier, third-tier cities approach them? I mean, every city has a problem to solve or multitude of problems to solve, but there isn't sufficient funding or sometimes political will to solve these problems. Do you think they should just focus on 1 or 2 of them rather than tackling too many problems at the same time?
Well, I think what's important is first being consciously aware of these inefficiencies or the lack of the lack of a bus shelter, right? And so you got a bus stop without a shelter, and then you've got I think in today's context, because we are looking at the current situation, right? So I think I think the problems will reduce because there's a reduction in the movement of people, so there's less pressure on public services, right? I mean, for a fact, I know that the buses that I traveled on now are less crowded. I'm not sure about the MRT, Calvin. I saw you on the MRT a couple of days ago on your phone, and so there's probably less utilization of public service during this period. Yeah. Now, and of course, the question, of course, do they then become redundant? So there could be. We talked about the new normal, and I think the new normal is also going to be a case where you will have new problems and you also have new solutions. And so for the second and third tier cities, Now, we see the talent that comes back will balance the city to be more desirable, right? I mean, they will come back and they will also look at how to improve these cities. Now, as I mentioned to a policymaker a month ago who writes the draft speech for the Minister of Trade and Industry in Vietnam, and I said national governments need to loosen up and let the local government make the decision and be more empowered. As you know, Calvin, I referred to the ASEAN Smart City Network. There are 26 cities that belong to the ASEAN Smart City Network. So a few days ago, I raised the question: why aren't there more cities that are being identified or being nominated for the ASEAN Smart City Network? Because there are some funding organizations out there, and I won't mention some, most of them are very reputable funding organizations and donor agencies that have used the ASEAN Smart City Network as a qualifying factor. Because so if you're not in this, one of the nominated cities of the ASEAN Smart City Network, then we will not consider funding a certain project, which I thought again was a missed opportunity and disadvantaging a second and third tier city. So I'm now promoting that Vietnam steps up and promotes more city. So the other thing, Kelvin, is that a lot of second and third tier cities are not so well known. So it was great to see what Bandung has done, the community in Bandung has done, right? So I think greater awareness of the existence of second and third tier cities will also lead to them being able to engage with and also, like I mentioned earlier on, solution. What has worked in Bandung could also work in Hanoi, or what's worked in Penang could work in Rwanda, right? So that exchanging of cross-border exchange of solutions and ideas and connecting social enterprises, incubators, and innovators is essential. And I think this has been, we see many barriers have been cut for innovation to activate and explode. And so that I'm quite optimistic of what we will see over the next 2 to 5 years, despite what we're going through right now. I know a lot of people are out of a job. I know that's what people have gone back to their provinces. But I think at the same time, it would blossom and explode new opportunities and make us more resilient and more lovable. And I think loving your community, loving your province. Singapore has got some policymakers are looking at how to make Singapore a more lovable nation. That's a surprise from the way Lee Kuan Yew had a view on Singapore being very pragmatic. So yeah, those are my quick thoughts, Kelvin.
Thank you very much, Retnam. I think those are not just quick thoughts, but very insightful reminders that with new normal, there are new problems and new solutions equally at the same time. So perhaps now we could hear from our audience. We see quite a lot of them from very interesting places. Perhaps I see Dhaka being mentioned several times. Can we invite someone from Dhaka to share their thoughts about the structural problems that their cities are facing?
Can we allow them to come on live and say something? Or is that?
Yes, is it possible for the attendees to speak? Right, let me see. Yep, I guess probably not. I've just received a text from the organizers. I think it's just us. So if you have any questions for the audience, please feel free to write them down either directly on this Slido app, or in the chat box. So perhaps I think moving on, I could read some of the structural problems that have been listed down. I guess one of them is, okay, let's read the one at the top. Because of no concrete urban planning method, political interventions on projects, laws are too many that sometimes it has no benefits to society and no power to implement. And so I think these are some of the common challenges of large megacities. So I think if we were to agree that lack of political will or lack of professional expertise in urban planning can lead to problems, urban problems. Perhaps it has got to do with the problem of megacities, right? Like this is clearly highlighted in the second point, where Dhaka is a big city. It contains second-tier cities, 3 to 4 different second-tier cities within a single large metropolitan area. The same could be said of Manila. Manila it contains a lot of smaller cities. So I think maybe this is a question again for Retnam. So do you think if there's a way out of this through design, by redrawing administrative boundaries? So is there a way to fix megacities? So if the megacities is dominating, absorbing all of the second-tier cities, how do we then relinquish these second-tier cities away from the megacity itself? Or is there simply just no solution to that?
It's a double-edged sword because it's a very contentious subject. Because if I was the mayor of a municipality and you're telling me you're going to redraw my municipality, and so I either increases the size of my community or decrease. So I think getting echo again.
Retnam, I think you need to mute for a while.
Sorry. Yeah, sorry. Yeah, Kevin, I'm sorry, Kevin. Yeah, it's a very contentious issue about redrawing and redesigning borders and within the municipality. Because if I was a mayor, I'd be very concerned if you brought up that issue. And what's happening is businesses will drive that development, right? I mean, we're working on the Red River Delta in the north of Vietnam, and it's a rather complex development, because we're looking at an area by itself without the territorial territorial lines of each province, and and this is within the urban laws. There is the area of the river is sensitive purely because of flooding, and also because it's in the north, in the north border close to China, and the other is that businesses have decided to make those changes. So what we see now is there has been an overemphasis on the west of Hanoi, and now we see a greater emphasis in the east. We see more development in the east. That the east still lacks infrastructure, still lacks road connectivity and public utilities for the east, and that's changing slowly. Going back to your earlier question about lack of political will, I think, and this was again echoed in this morning's this meeting with the leaders of the various provinces, about 20 provinces of Vietnam. And there was emphasis, importance of leaders understanding digital connectivity and communication crisis, and there was an urge that they need to improve their competency of how to even improve negotiation skills, regional and international cooperation. And so a lot of that comes down to capacity building. So we need to, there is a need, I mean, there is a political will. They realize and recognize it, but there could be a gap, there could be a lack of competency in that particular area, and particularly in the field of AI, digital twin, and in terms of even waste management. So recently we have Muhammad Yunus, the Nobel laureate, as of Yunus Environment Hub, have established a recycling waste plant in the Mekong region. And here again, it's intervention from a private sector social entrepreneur who's come in and to address the needs of the local community, the local province. So local governments have to sort of play less a regulatory role and be more involved in stimulating and encouraging these businesses to then decide on how to shape their environment and their territory. And so there will be it'll be more fuzzy, it'll be more blur within provinces, and it's all part of regional integration or interoperability, the word that's been used recently.
All right, thank you very much, Retnam. I guess we have come to the end of our allocated time slot. Okay. I see that the next session speakers and moderators are already here. Right. So okay. I guess maybe just one parting word. What is your outlook for second-tier cities, or what's your hope for second-tier cities in Southeast Asia?
I can't speak with I don't have a real feel of many cities, Kelvin. I mean, I've spent more time in the Mekong region, right? Now, I think rapid urbanization is not the answer, it's the importance to preserve your heritage and culture and the intangible assets, and because we've seen that movement from urban center to non-urban center, and so as Saibal mentioned, I think yesterday, the end of monocentric cities and more polycentric cities. So both businesses, local governments, and enterprises need to recognize it and build on it, and build back better, as all the speakers have said. Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much, Retnam. I hope everyone enjoyed the session and found it to be very useful. Yeah, feel free to reach out to us. You can get our contacts from the organizers if you have any questions regarding second-tier cities or our work in Southeast Asia. Thank you very much, everyone. Have a good day.
Thank you. Bye.